In this video, we're going to be looking at the Clone Wars era and analysing the relevant sources to determine how powerful this era actually is. And by how powerful the era is, I mean how powerful is the dark side, how powerful is the light side. So the strength of the dark side and the light side, and in turn, its users. So firstly, to fully understand how powerful this era is, I recommend watching the first two parts of this little series, which looks at how powerful the Phantom Menace is and how powerful the Attack of the Clones is. Because the Clone Wars characters largely scale from and grow from those previous eras. So for a quick recap, the prequel era in general, starting with the Phantom Menace, is called the Prime of the Jedi by Lucas.
This is the heyday, the golden age of Jedi.
The light side has gotten too strong, the darkness has risen as a result, and both sides of the Force are stronger in the galaxy than they've ever been before. And of course, the Father warns.
Too much dark or light would be the undoing of life as you understand it.
Lucas says that while the guys from the original trilogy are broken old men and beat up tin cans, the prequel Jedi are Jedi Godzillas. And the faster fighting, you know how they fight fast, a lot faster in the prequels than they do in the original trilogy. The faster fight is meant to convey that very thing, that these Jedi in the prequels are better and stronger and more powerful than what we've seen before. This isn't some issue about real-world technology limiting the original trilogy fights. And whilst it's true to some extent, I mean, yeah, they probably would have done a little bit more with the fights had they had better special effects technology back then, but it still remains true that these characters are still written. Even if they had that technology, the characters are still written as beat up old, weak old men and half-trained youths and cripples. This fact does not change.
It was a fight between a very old man and a man who was only partially a man and mostly a mechanical being. So it wasn't really much of a sword fight at all. As we went on, we wanted to have the lightsaber fights become faster and more intense as Luke became more proficient in the art of sword fighting. In every episode from 4, 5, and 6, I kept improving the sword fighting because the assumption was that Luke was getting to be a better fighter. He was learning more, but at the same time, he still wasn't, being trained as an original Jedi would have been trained. Then when we moved to the prequel, where there were Jedi in their full flower and fighting as they were in the past, well-trained Jedi, then we had to make the sword fights much, much faster, much more sophisticated, and much more aggressive in terms of the way they're fought. And we continued that.
Brave of you, boy. But I would have thought you had learned your lesson.
I am a slow learner.
The fights become actually much more ferocious than, say, the ones in episode 4, 5, and 6. Because we'd actually never seen real Jedis at work. We'd only seen, old men and crippled half-droid, half-men, and young boys that had learned from these people. So to see a Jedi fighting in the prime of the Jedi, I wanted it to be a much more energetic and faster version of what we've been doing.
And so it's through the fighting that Lucas shows us the prime of the Jedi. He demonstrates that the Phantom Menace is the most powerful the Jedi have ever been through the fighting style. That's what's meant to convey their power. So the Phantom Menace are the most powerful the Jedi have ever been. They are the prime of the Jedi. And then Attack of the Clones is a step up from that. Everybody grows, they advance as fighters, they get more powerful between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. So Attack of the Clones is even stronger. For some scale, Nick Gillard, the prequel stunt coordinator who worked on a series of combat threat level tiers with George Lucas in the making of the films. So he knows all about the fighting and everything. He works with George on it. And he said that Anakin from Attack of the Clones would cream Darth Maul from the Phantom Menace. So that is the gap between, the most powerful guy in Phantom Menace and Anakin in Attack of the Clones. It's a massive gap. Some more scale as well. The Attack of the Clones Council is said to be the 12 most powerful Jedi ever. So that'll just give you a idea of the gap between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and then going forward now into the Clone Wars, we can see how much they grow from there. So of course, going into the Clone Wars era, everyone continues to grow from that point in Attack of the Clones. These are the Jedi at the very peak of their powers.
Friendships forged, and Jedi at the peak of our powers.
Season 6 of Clone Wars explains how, as the Jedi fight the war, they grow stronger. So the longer they fight in the war, the stronger they grow. And Yoda's dark side, the dark side avatar of Yoda, says to Yoda, the longer the Jedi fight the war, the more the darkness grows within them. And then they say, why do you hate what gives you power? So Yoda says, why do you hate what gives you power? So it's this darkness that's grown within them. It's given them power. The Jedi are growing stronger and stronger the longer they fight in the Clone War.
I choose not to give you power, and yet you spend your days in the decadence of war. And with that, I grow inside you. Why do you hate what gives you power?
So this growing darkness inside the Jedi is making the Jedi stronger, and as a result, in turn, is feeding the darkness and the corruption in the living Force and making the Force less connective. Because as we talked about in previous videos, the Force is like a web that connects everyone. The Father says on Mortis that the mortals are exploiting their power. We've talked about this in this video, but he says that the mortals are exploiting their powers. The definition of exploit means to make full use of. So the ones represent the power in the galaxy that flows from all living things. The dark side represented in the sun, the light side of that represented in the daughter. And the sun has been growing more powerful forever and is now stronger than he's ever been before. Representative, of course, of how the dark is stronger than it's ever been before. The dark side as a whole is, the greatest despair in the Phantom Menace. It's stronger now than ever before. Star Wars Secrets Revealed in 3D by Pablo Hidalgo explains that although the sun has always touched the dark side, never before has he held it so deeply within his grip. And of course, the stronger the sun, the stronger the Sith. The same book says that as the sun reaches further into the dark side, so too will the Sith gain strength and power.
The sun who drifts ever closer to the dark. As my son has descended into the dark side, so have the Sith gained strength.
The ones guard the balance of the Force by standing in as caps, as a barrier for the accessible power that mortals can access, so that people don't, get too strong and have to leave the galaxy like the ones did. But with the ever-growing imbalance, the mortals have managed to encroach on that cap, that max point that the ones represent, that cap on the amount of accessible Force power. And that's not to be understated. The Clone Wars characters, at least as of Season 3, are on a level with the literal gods of the Force. And this is one of the big issues with the galaxy. Everything is going to shit, it's all out of control. The Father explains that the ones are so powerful that they had to leave the galaxy to better preserve the balance of the Force on Mortis. But now the mortals are exploiting that same power. The Father says that they had to leave because they had too much power, so they had to leave the galaxy. And Anakin asks why the Father summoned them, and he tells him that he summoned them there because people are exploiting that power. And of course that's the power that was too strong to remain in the galaxy, so it had to leave. So the Father follows this up by emphasising that too much, dark or light, will be the undoing of life as you understand it, which of course is why the ones had to leave the galaxy, because they had that level of power. But now the mortals are getting that strong as well, and posing that same threat. So that's the kind of threat we're looking at this point in time in the Clone Wars. That's the power of these characters. The characters of this era are exploiting the ones' powers and getting as strong as the ones are, and posing the exact same threat the ones posed before they had to leave the galaxy. And of course that is one of the reasons why the Father is called Anakin. This is all a result of the greatest imbalance in the Force that's ever been.
My children and I can manipulate the Force like no other. Therefore it was necessary to withdraw from the temporal world and live here as anchorites.
Then why reveal yourselves to us?
There are some who would like to exploit our power. The Sith are but one. Too much dark or light would be the undoing of life as you understand it.
So the father says on Mortis that the mortals are exploiting the one's powers. And the very episode before Mortis, where the father says that their powers are being exploited, is Witches of the Mist. The father says that the Sith are but one of the groups exploiting the power. The Night Sisters can be seen doing this in the very previous episode just before Mortis. So just before Mortis, in Witches of the Mist, the Night Sisters obviously create Savage Opress, a force abomination born from the light side energies of the daughter, that have been pulled directly from her spirit and twisted into dark side Night Sister magics. I'm probably thinking, what? Because this isn't really explained in the episode, but in the source material it goes over it in depth. Book of Sith explains how this energy known as Spirit Ichor is pulled directly from the daughter, and then it's this energy which is infused into Savage. Savage is described as a weapon forged by the darkest of sorcery. He is said to be a threat that can consume the entire galaxy with hate, and night will fall.
The Clone Wars are kicking into high gear. An act of betrayal will create a new threat that could consume the galaxy with hate.
You must put your plot into effect now.
Night will fall. Its betrayal.
Your assassin, Eliminator.
No!
Will set in motion a chain of events that even the Jedi might not be powerful enough to stop, and lead to the creation of a new threat.
He is ready, sisters.
Unknown to the Jedi, a new threat has been unleashed on the galaxy. Savage Opress.
He's described as a threat even more powerful than the previous combined Jedi and Sith orders. It's stated that the Jedi in general might not be enough to stop him.
I can sense him, Grievous. That creature, Savage Opress, is growing stronger and stronger as each day passes. You consider him a threat? He is a threat to all of us, even the Jedi. With the Night Sisters eradicated, there is no one left to control him. Something is rising. Something sinister.
They might not be powerful enough to stop just him, the entire Jedi. That's how strong Savage is. He's the prime example of the exploitation of the power of the gods.
Nearly strong enough to defeat them all.
Calm yourself. You will be.
He's a lot like Abeloth. He's a Abeloth type figure who comes and consumes the galaxy with hate, who brings the night, who no one can stop, and not even the Jedi Order as a whole is powerful enough to stop him. Of course, I'm talking about his full power in the Force, not his performances all of the time, because he lacks the skills and ability to focus that power for a lot of what we see. But you do see it come out in moments, like when he overpowers Anakin and Kenobi at once, with his scream, and you see that sort of ichor smoke around him, and you get that sort of same echo when he lets out this power. There's all these little nods to how powerful these people are, and it's mostly quite cryptic, to be honest, because obviously Clone Wars is a kid's cartoon and it's not about like showing big flashy feats or anything like some video games are. You know, it's relatively grounded medium, and a lot of these details are revealed through source material, and when you read through the source material, it really is crazy how it shifts your perspective on the narrative of what's going on in the episodes. So back to Mortis real quick. Remember how the ones guard the power, but the mortals are exploiting it anyway and still encroaching on their power level? Well, then the ones die, and nobody is left to guard that power.
We are the ones who guard the power.
There are some who would like to exploit our power.
The sun was still descending into the dark side. There's still descent, there's still depth for him to descend, to plunge into the dark side. But now he's dead. So it's free. It's free reign for the Sith to make that descent. There's no one on guard on the power. They're free to exploit the power as much as they want. the available power in the galaxy just goes crazy and everyone's stronger than ever. For some scale on this, Kenobi is already shown to be a threat to the sun within the episode itself. So the father gets completely destroyed by the sun, and then they say later on that the sun plus Dark Anakin wouldn't instantly stomp the father again, as long as Kenobi is there to help the father.
You will stop this! You are too weak for me, old man. You mean nothing to me anymore.
The son says the father is too weak and nothing to him anymore.
If I know my old master, he too will try to stop us. Together, with your father, they could be a formidable opponent.
I can turn the tide in our favor. Stay here.
Add Kenobi to the mix, and it shifts the tide out of their favour. So Kenobi makes that crucial difference between the father getting stomped and the father not getting stomped, even when Anakin's involved as well. So Kenobi is up there with the ones in their proximity, and a lot of people don't really get onto these little details in the episode. Yeah, these characters are a lot closer to the ones than you might first realise. The Jedi and Sith are essentially Force angels and demons within the context of the lore anyway. They're also divine beings like the ones in and of themselves as Jedi and Sith. And that's just part of how the Force works. I'll dive into all those details in depth in another video as well. Later on, of course, after all the power goes crazy, you get all of the Clone Wars dudes like Maul and Savage, Kenobi, Ventress, etc. all on a similar level, all on this crazy level that was previously just simply impossible to reach, with the ones alive and acting as that cap and guarding the power. So essentially how you should scale it is everyone levels up, everyone grows from Attack of the Clones, and then Savage reaches this absolutely ridiculous level. And then it's by the late seasons of Clone Wars, later on in the not necessarily the late seasons, but later on in the Clone Wars, after seasons 3, you see these characters, like all the Clone Wars dudes, like Maul and Savage, Ventress, Kenobi, etc. They all get past this level that Savage establishes as a level that's above the previous combined Jedi and Sith. So everyone grows from that point. So that's how strong these characters are in the Clone Wars era. And all of this, like exploiting the powers of the gods and Savage showing up, it's all done by the creators to, quote, kick things into higher gear.
It's betrayal.
Your assassin, Eliminator.
No!
Will set in motion a chain of events that even the Jedi might not be powerful enough to stop, and lead to the creation of a new threat.
He is ready, sisters.
One who could consume the galaxy with hate. Basically, he's no joke. It's time for the Clone Wars to kick into high gear, and nothing will be the same.
Anakin, look out!
Seriously, don't miss part 1 of a special 3-part Star Wars The Clone Wars event.
The Clone Wars are kicking into high gear. An act of betrayal will create a new threat that could consume the galaxy with hate.
You must basically set up the stakes that these guys are the strongest characters we've seen. And they might not appear like it since, as I mentioned, they're mostly depicted in the Clone Wars cartoon medium, which keeps things very grounded, like the movies. But that doesn't change the narrative behind it. So it might have a very grounded display of how power is depicted in that medium, but that just doesn't change the narrative behind how powerful these guys are. It doesn't change the story. And that only goes for the 2008 Clone Wars. The 2003 Clone Wars amps up powers a lot more so than keeps them more grounded. You've got people blowing up ships and blasting away armies and throwing spaceships everywhere with the Force. But this is all just another medium difference to consider. We talked about all medium sort of stuff here. But of course, it's the narrative behind it all that matters, more so than feats, as we talked about. Yeah, feat comparisons are basically worthless when coming to a conclusion about a character's power level or an era's power level. The Clone Wars era has always been that era that everyone looks back on, you know, like in the original trilogy or the New Jedi Order, or even as far as Legacy. And people look back at the Clone Wars as having been the prime of the Jedi, the strongest the Jedi have ever been. And that's also it's reflected in stuff like Children of the Jedi, for example, where Master Plett He's just a random botanist Jedi. He's a botanist from the Jedi Order from the Clone Wars, and he's still around in Luke's time. And he's pretty much just portrayed as this like Jedi god. Like he's far and above everyone else of that era, just simply because he's a Clone Wars Jedi. He's a Jedi of old. But that's how strong the Clone Wars era is anyway. Of course, Revenge of the Sith is usually just included in the Clone Wars era, but for the purposes of this little video series, I'm doing it one at a time. So I'm doing Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Clone Wars, then Revenge of the Sith. But the Clone Wars era as a whole is the strongest era in Star Wars. So all in all, the Clone Wars era is, up to its point in time, the strongest era by a mile, with these levels of power being previously impossible for anyone to even reach. And so this just sets a new bar above which the characters continue to grow from. You can only imagine how mad it gets when you get to Revenge of the Sith, how powerful people get then. We'll get into all that next time. But yeah, sorry about the delay in uploads and all that. I own a business in real life, so it's been booming recently, so I haven't had too much spare time to get on and do this and make these videos, but I will keep popping them out. I'm never going to quit. Been posting on YouTube since I was about 12, so it might seem like I've vanished every now and again, but I've just got a business shit going on, and then I'll never stop posting, so don't worry, there'll always be a new video. Just have to probably keep reminding me a few times and I'll get onto it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, let us know what you think, and we'll see you in the next one. So yeah, in a bit.